My name is Peter Vaassen. I'm a segment director of Future Transmission Grids at DNV. In this short tutorial, I will talk about the mix of transmission and distribution. In the last two tutorials, we talked about the definition of hybrid grid and the mix of generation. So what is the mix of transmission and distribution? Actually, it is how the electricity is transported from the generation point. It can be far away, offshore wind farms, big solar farms, or locally from within the cities, as you see here on the rooftops, to the point where you use it. And how is it transported? Either by transmission lines, like this, or cables, like this, or some intermediate form. It can be a halfway. You can even think of transporting it physically in the form of batteries, and then you can think of an electric vehicle, the battery inside. So, oh, by the way, of course, as most of you, including myself, have an iPhone, sorry for making some advertising for a certain company, but they have wireless charging. So there is another choice of transportation. It could be wireless, of course not for the electricity as we know it today. Okay, if we think about the choice of transmission and distribution, how to deliver the electricity at the place of use, for the next era there are actually three reasons to think about. And the first reason is it must be effective, it must be efficient, effective and efficient. It must be, of course, very reliable, because we don't want to have electricity supply interrupted. And it must be accepted by the public. We have to accept the system as it is to deliver the electricity to our homes. For simplicity's sake, I will now only talk about the comparison between overhead lines and cables. And I think it's good to mention that in the general public there is often some misunderstanding about cables and lines. A line like this is something which is mounted on poles and is above ground, where a cable or underground system is actually put underground or put in a tunnel where it is buried. So that's the difference. So remember, lines are above ground and cables are underground. Why do we use cables, for example, or instead of transmission lines? Basically, there are three reasons. Reason number one, there is limited space. As you can see here, transmission lines take up a lot of space. It has to be a broad path, the right of way, whereas the cables can be put more closer together, so limit the space. Of course, another very important reason is the public opinion. Citizens oppose often transmission lines or substations. They don't like to see these things in the landscape. That's often labeled the cave syndrome, citizens against virtual everything. And then the reliability issue. You can imagine that when you have a cable system, it's much less vulnerable to storms or flooding than transmission lines. So what we see, undergrounding power system is definitely a trend, but we have to remember it's of course much more expensive. And although there are some technical issues with cable systems, I'll come to that in a minute, maybe one thing to remember and for you to think about, when a country has a high share of underground cable systems, especially in the medium and the low voltage, like Singapore or the Netherlands where I live, then we found out that the reliability of the system, the average outage for customers, is very low. So actually it improves reliability. But it means we have to find ways to detect and locate those outages, if any, or if failures occur, very accurate. For that we have a system that's called Smart Cable Guard, which can detect the fault location within 1%. Coming back to the technical issues about undergrounding transmission systems. The cables, like these, have to be developed because the transmission capacity and the voltage is of course often less than that of transmission lines. So we have to develop new tests for new types of cables. And if you put large stretches of cables on land, you have to connect them with joints. And a lot of joints raise reliability issues. So the conclusion is undergrounding, definitely a trend. We didn't solve anything, all the things yet, and explained you again on aspects of hybrid grids. And stay tuned. You can download, of course, a position paper related to the reliability of future grids from our website. And I look forward to meet you again for the next short video. Thank you.